Hello on the air, the program time with the basic events of the day. Russian forces are at the fringes of Grozny. The parliament of Belarus accuses the administration of the president of corruption. In Moscow, a large quantity of weapons has been confiscated. And again, the White House in Washington has been shot at, and there are some injuries. Today, the Russian armed forces have increased their activities on their location at the access points to Grozny. All information agencies and our correspondents reported information throughout the entire day. Commenting is Alexander Shkiranze. The heat of the dramatic events which began in Chechnya 2 weeks ago doesn't subside. There are many assessments of the situation of the most varied kind, but unfortunately not all imply the quick resolution of the conflict on a constitutional basis. What's there to hide? The heaviest burden fell on Russians in military uniforms who found themselves in the zone of conflict without precise orders or a plan of action. After the breakthrough which occurred at the last session of the Security Council, when it became evident that Jihad Dudayev either doesn't intend to pursue disarmament of gang formations or is not any longer in control of the situation, armed forces of Russia began to act more decisively. During the last night, 15 units of combat technology were demolished and 10 artillery installations of Jihad Dudayev supporters. Currently, detachments of Russian armed forces have approached Grozny in the northwesterly, northeasterly and easterly directions. Meanwhile, in the capital of Chechnya itself, as a result of aviation attacks which precisely bombed military objects, panic reigns. Although Chechen leadership refutes this information, it stated that during the night raids and bombings in the city, 120 people have died. While in Grozny, attempts are being undertaken to clear the rubble and extinguish fires, which is hampered by tanks, combat transporters and artillery installed in the city, on streets partially as a show of force of the Dudayev regime, armed regiments of the Chechen presidential supporters began to abandon central parts of Grozny. Using the south corridor, they are moving to the fringes of the city or mountainous areas in the south of the republic with the aim of establishing guerrilla bases there. Despite the complexity of the situation, the head of the Government Task Commission on talks with Chechnya, Vyacheslav Mikhailov, feels that notwithstanding how the question is resolved by force of sides, the possibility always remains for talks. At a press conference held today, he stated that the actions of the Russian force ministries in resolving the Chechen crisis were not coordinated with the efforts of the diplomats. Considering the similar position of several other politicians and parliamentarians, there is the evident disparity in views and opinions on further regularization, but people authorized by the president nonetheless have their own approach. I'm of the position that we should conduct no further dialogues with Dudayev. We should have known from the beginning that he would never go for it. In an exclusive interview for the program Time, Sergei Stepashin expressed serious concern over the increase in number of mercenaries, but not from neighboring republics of the Northern Caucasus, which was the intimidating factor lately. First of all, these are representatives of Afghanistan, a sufficiently large group of mujahids who fought in the Afghan war and were in camps in Afghanistan and Pakistan. There are also Tajiks who support the opposition of Tajikistan. Apart from that, also there's a large number of representatives from the Baltic region. We know that because 3 days ago, 2 snipers were killed with Latvian passports. Today at noon, a peace protest began. The idea of the initiators was to form a live chain of people and stretch along the entire highway, Rostov-Baku. In Ingushetia, this chain stretched from Nazran to Sunja, and it was basically comprised of children. As the temporary information center of the government of Russia reported in the evening, today a Russian sanitary medical helicopter was shot down, which was attempting to evacuate a seriously injured officer. As a result, physicians died: Major Pokhlebin, Senior Lieutenant Yermolov, and 1 crew member. The Red Cross insignia apparently doesn't help. There's one more problem which accompanies the conflict activities. This is refugees. During the last days, immigration services of Russia received 1,116 refugees from Chechnya, and altogether there are already 100,000. Airplanes have delivered 324 tons of humanitarian cargo. There's one more problem which the Russian government is attempting to resolve, that is to ensure pension payments to citizens of Chechnya. Jihad Dudayev revoked them in June of this year. Today the money will be directed there from the funds of the Republican Pension Fund. At the extended meeting of the State Council, the higher organ of executive power in the Republic Dagestan, the situation was discussed here in light of the events in Chechnya, and mostly the question was posed sharply by the leaders of the National Council of the Dagestan to Chechens to bring to an end the matter of the full release of military servicemen, Russian internal forces, who were disarmed in a malicious manner and taken prisoner the 11th of December in the suburb of Khasayurt. The issue regards the fate of 20 officers and privates who still remain hostages in an unknown location. Also, discussion seriously touched on how and through what means to ensure that in the Khasayurt region and other sites, the reception for refugees from Chechnya would be set up. In Khasayurt alone, according to current information, there are more than 20,000 people. A resolution was adopted on additional measures to tighten patrol in Dagestan of the national border of Russia. Yesterday, a decision was adopted in accordance with which, on the territory of the Chechen Republic, so as to prevent the escalation of violence, weapons will be bought back, and the appropriate money has been found for this operation. Today, in the suburban residence of the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin met with Viktor Chernomyrtin. According to Tartas News, they discussed providing economic aid for regions of Chechnya which have been cleared of the unlawful gang formations. Today, the party, the press, issued a statement on the situation in Chechnya. Its leader, the Vice Premier, Sergei Shakharai, expounded his position to the press. It appears that the Chechen crisis in the light of Duma decisions will soon boil down to a formula: the number of factions equals the number of plans to resolve. Today, suggestions were offered by Sergei Shakharai. The scenario of the press faction provides for the use of force, but only in the initial stage. The second and third stages include steps to restore the economy and have elections. Shakharai's view on developments of Chechnya was of special interest to journalists because recently he had implemented the Russian national policies. On today's situation, Shakharai commented, "Dudayev doesn't want talks, but even if he does agree, local field commanders will prevent that. The threat of terrorist acts is a reality. The possibility of guerrilla war exists, but there can be no discussion of a major Caucasus war. It's evident that on a federal level there is a deficit of political formulae, models, and a deficit of a lawful and analytical, if you will, foundation in order to resolve this difficult problem. If my experience and knowledge will be useful here, my personal acquaintance with almost all the acting leaders, if I can help, I should. This is like a doctor's mission." Deputies of the State Duma who are in Grozny conveyed through the Russian Information Agency an appeal to the President of Russia. They urged Boris Yeltsin, with his characteristic decisiveness, to stop the avalanche of war and begin talks. "We are certain," it says further in the appeal, "that peaceful means are far from exhausted to resolve the conflict as is presented by those who continue to incite major bloodshed in the Caucasus and far beyond its parameters." Signed by the authorized official of human rights in Russia, Sergei Kovalyov, and the deputies from the faction Yabloko, Apple, Russia's Choice, and the Communist Party. Today, at the demonstration in Grozny, the head of the press service of the Russian government was sentenced to death in absentia. The authorized representative of the head of the cabinet, the minister, Valentin Sergeyev. Participants of the demonstration admonished Chechens living in Moscow to target all those who advocate restoring constitutional lawfulness in Chechnya. Evidently, events in Chechnya have caused the Ministry of Internal Affairs to increase their efforts in confiscating weapons in Moscow and reduce the number of firearms and learn to resist terrorists. Unfortunately, this is a very current goal. In this plush teddy bear and these beer cans, homemade machines from hell. Those which you see will no longer harm anyone, but the explosive arsenal of criminals is still massive. You know very well that we in Russia have approximately 2 major explosions daily, and the reaction to these incidents must be precise. Today, special training was held to develop means of combating crimes committed with the use of criminal explosives. Of special interest was the suit for defusing bombs and also the so-called bomb blanket. The forces of this quick response unit from the special designation internal forces demonstrated their ability in disarming criminal groups and freeing hostages, the ability to quickly and precisely fulfill their objectives. They demonstrated often in a real-life situation. There is a scandal in the higher echelons of Belarusian parliament. The parliament heard a report on corruption in the president's administration. The president categorically refutes such a possibility. Lyudmila Veluga from Minsk with a more detailed story of today in Belarusian parliament. Today, Belarusian parliament spent the day in a state close to shock, which was precipitated by the speech of the deputy Sergei Antonchik, incidentally the former deputy of Alexander Lukashenko, who just recently, in the Supreme Soviet, had headed the commission on the battle with corruption. Taking over the post of his boss, Antonchik exposed many cases of corruption supposedly occurring within the presidential team. The deputy accused around 10 official figures, including the prime minister and his 3 deputies, the head of the president's administration and the minister of defense, and stated that the corruption ball is hosted by the executive secretary in the administration of the president, Ivan Titinkov. However, it's true the speaker did not cite a single concrete incident. The nerves were shaken of the head of the administration, Leonid Sinitin, who asked to be dismissed, and following suit was the Minister of Defense, Anatoly Kostenko. The rest of the accused managed to remain calm. Regarding the president himself, he told the press during the break that the political undercurrent of what had occurred today is the imminent election campaign for the new parliament, and he intends to defend those in his immediate surrounding. Corruption in the administration of the president never existed nor will. Ukraine. Today it became known that Euro Parliament has ratified the proposal of the European Commission to provide macro-financial aid to Ukraine in the size of 85 million AQ. In the opinion of experts, this is an important political signal of support for reforms in Ukraine. An energy disaster. The situation in the country was called by the president of Ukraine, Leonid Kuchma. It's only December, and at heating stations, almost the entire winter reserve of fuel has been used up. To somehow supplement it through traditional Russian deliveries, Ukraine has no opportunity because of its solid debts, and the local resources here are more than restricted. As a result, the development of electrical power has declined so drastically that its users are turned off on an emergency basis. In these circumstances, the energy sector sees one solution. Major energy-intense manufacturing facilities, which don't pay for electrical power, which can temporarily be done without, must be closed down for the winter season. Meanwhile, on occasions, extreme measures are implemented. In the Kharkiv district, for example, all companies, and that is more than 400 plants, are on a 2-day working week, except for those which are within the sphere of life-sustaining services. The schedule of the work of institutions is restricted by the framework of daylight, and the city transportation is functioning on a special schedule. If the situation with fuel deliveries remains as is, it's not excluded. Intermittent power cutoffs will occur in residential quarters and the decrease in broadcasting of television programs. Today in the Russian capital, parliamentary hearings were underway on the topic of minimum salary. Parliamentarians are just as concerned as the majority of the country's population. What should the minimum salary be? Equal for all regions of Russia? And how should it be calculated? Adjusted to the budget or vice versa to form the budget based on minimum salary? Who should establish it? In many countries, for example, this is done through dialogues between the employers and the unions. And in our country, the State Duma is preparing a law currently to answer these questions. It was already adopted in the first reading and currently is being reworked. From today's parliamentary hearings, which involved scientists, representatives of executive power and labor unions, the deputies expect concrete recommendations, but that's for the future and what about now? And what is the fate of the decision of the State Duma on the minimum salary of 54,000 rubles? The government has proposed to establish a minimum level of salary at the level of the minimum pension, 34,400. That means, considering supplemental payments from the Schedules 1 to 4, it will turn out to be 54,100. And further, our objective is to find a mechanism which will be able to embrace the maximum number of people. Considering today's salary and today's prices for housing, not many still have hope of acquiring housing in the near or even distant future. But as Itartas reports from the government of Moscow, from the new year in the capital, the sale of housing bonds will begin. This is a new type of a security with a nominal value of 1/10 of a square meter of the overall area in apartment buildings. The life of the bond is established for the year 1995 and 96. Apart from Muscovites, they can be acquired by oil and gas sector workers and also those people who have worked in the extreme north. And now about what was said in the government about the development of Yakutia. One can't count the diamonds in the permafrost in the Republic Sakha-Yakutia. One can't count them unless the government can thoroughly conduct a geological survey, especially in the northern regions. And much cannot be calculated in these parts without investing the proper funds. Today at the session of the Expert Council of the Government, chaired by Georgi Khizhi, they examined the draft program of the social and economic development of that region, a program which should receive federal status. In it, there are 10 priority sub-programs, such as energy, transportation, communications, natural resources, and construction. They will permit, by the plan of the developers, by the year 2005, the new economic frontier of the Russian state, to make rudimental changes in the quality of life of the Republic. The cost of the project, 14.4 trillion rubles at 1994 prices. However, from the federal budget, only 9% will be needed. To implement the idea, a curious mechanism of management is suggested. It combines centralized control and market flexibility. The administration of the project to be established will be formed on a priority basis from the government of Russia and the government of Yakutia. Despite all problems today from the national testing polygon of missile forces of strategic designation, the launch was successfully completed of the first Russian intercontinental ballistic missile Topol-M. After completing the full testing program, the missile will be added to the armory. Today, there is also thought of new forms of lesser aviation. The production of a light-motored plane, one of the prospective directions in the world aviation construction. In the United States alone, 85% of all the aviation craft are such economic vehicles. In our country, they've even stopped producing the antiquated corn dusters, and this despite the fact that with the development of small aviation, many Russian design offices connect their future. They've already created many new good models, but can't mass produce them. There's no money. Some economists feel that to resolve such an important problem for the country, and possibly not only it, financial industrial groups will be of help. In the Federative Council, with the support of entrepreneurs, a draft law on their operations is in the works. However, certain groups have already formed and are actively beginning to work. For example, the monthly profiled company Milan, in cooperation with an entire series of aviation plants, is preparing the new airplane for mass production. Currently, we're developing workable, feasible projects which will include the manufacturing stage and all supplementary components. And we're working. The plane will have many modifications. Even the military are interested in it. It was developed in the private design office of the company. We hope that we will produce our first airplane in the end of 1995 or the beginning of 96. At one time, financial industrial groups had recalled to life the South Korean economic miracle. Can they realistically help Russia? Time will show. In January and September of 1994 in Russia, for foreign investments comprised only 2% of the overall volume of capital investments in domestic industry. As analysts feel, such small volumes are explained mostly by the absence of a reliable normative and legal basis, and also the instability of the financial economic situation. And here's what was said today about the economic situation by Anatoly Chubais and Alexander Lifshitz. By decree of the President of Russia, it's planned to establish increases on pensions for veterans of the Great Patriotic War, old-aged invalids, and widows of victims. Social support will affect almost 3.5 million people. This was reported today in Moscow by the presidential aide on economic issues, Alexander Lifshitz. With the first vice premier of the government, Anatoly Chubais, they commented on 4 presidential decrees. One of them regards the privatization of plants which process agricultural goods and agricultural services, which will bind closer interests of producers and processors. Finally, by decree of the President, a strict responsibility is established for fulfilling obligations and payments for delivery of finished products. From January 1st, a limit of 3 months on transactions will take effect, which should finally wipe out the non-payment problem. As Anatoly Chubais reported, the work of the Conciliatory Commission on the budget for 95 has been completed. A mutually agreed-upon decision was adopted. Tomorrow in the Duma, it should be examined in its first reading. It's realistic risk that the budget will be ratified, Anatoly said, although he didn't exclude other options because the government wouldn't agree for only one version when the stated policy finds itself under threat, emphasized the first deputy chairman of government. Prior to going to the events from abroad, I'll announce to you one more urgent announcement connected with the events in Chechnya. I was just brought this in the studio. By decision of the government of Russia, the government is forced to adopt the following measures. From 0000 hours, the 21st of December 1994, that means tonight, temporarily until special instructions are issued, entry into the Russian Federation will be barred for individuals, except for those returning to their permanent residence, transportation vehicles, cargoes, shipments from the Azerbaijan Republic and the Republic of Georgia. Air contact is to be severed with Azerbaijan and Georgia from airports of Ingushetia, Dagestan, Northern Ossetia, and also several others, and as well sea contact with those countries from the ports of the Russian Federation on the Black, Azov, and Caspian Seas. Today, a representative of the Foreign Affairs Department of Russia commented on the trip of the American former president, Jimmy Carter, to Bosnia-Herzegovina. The Russian side, in principle, is for any efforts which will help to realize the peace plan of the contact group, but the trip of the ex-president, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs sees exclusively as the action of a private person. This approach is shared by the American State Department. About what is happening today in former Yugoslavia, our personal correspondent, Vladimir Solovyov, will tell us. He's there. The former president of the United States, Jimmy Carter, who has lately become the talisman of American foreign policy, again has found himself in the necessary place at the necessary time. Therefore, he was successful at many things which European diplomats couldn't achieve for a long time. Monday, after 9 hours of talks in the main city of the Bosnian Serbs, Pali, Jimmy Carter and the president of the Serb Republic, Radovan Karadzic, and the commander of the Serb forces, Colonel General Ratko Mladic, signed an agreement which the leadership of the Bosnian Serbs views as the beginning of the end of war. The agreement provides for a 4-month ceasefire, which should take effect in 1 week. That means next Tuesday, the 27th of December. The resumption of dialogues on an overall peaceful resolution for the Bosnian crisis on the basis of the proposal of the contact group, the gradual withdrawal of troops from the confrontation line, and the deployment of peacekeeping forces along the front line, free movement of humanitarian convoy, exchange of prisoners, and the opening of the Sarajevo airport. Now, while the program time is being aired, the special airplane of Jimmy Carter should land in the Belgrade airport, Surchin, for evening. A meeting is planned with the president of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic, and tomorrow, arriving in the Yugoslavian capital, will be the international contact group. Probably tomorrow we will learn, will Bosnia and Herzegovina greet the new year without war? And one more reaction regarding Yugoslavian matters from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. Concern and disappointment is expressed by it because of blocking the adoption of the decision on deliveries of Russian humanitarian shipments of fuel to former Yugoslavia. For the third time in the last while, shots rang out near the White House in Washington. The President, Bill Clinton, was at that time in his residence, but as far as is known, he was not subject to any danger. This time, 2 shots were fired near the fence of the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue. 1 person was injured. From London, they report that because of a powerful bomb found yesterday in a Northern Ireland town, the second round of preliminary talks between representatives of the British government and leaders of the Republican Party, Sinn Féin, were held in an extremely tense atmosphere of mutual accusations and suspicion. The government of Great Britain could not achieve agreement on the immediate disarmament of the Irish Republican Army. London has difficulties in Gibraltar as well. Around 50 additional measures pursuant to the directives of the European Community should be adopted by the end of next month by Gibraltar. Otherwise, Great Britain warns possibly the very rigid sanctions will be levied, not excluding introducing direct rule. Direct rule on a dependent territory, officially a colony, is an extreme measure. During talks this week in London, the ministers of foreign affairs of Great Britain and Spain will definitely attempt to avoid the scenario scenario, especially since Madrid doesn't abandon ambitions to spread its own sovereignty to Gibraltar. And yet the threat of decisive actions by London is a menace on the sea's horizon. The Constitution of Gibraltar, adopted 25 years ago, gives the right to Great Britain to suspend the local assembly and intervention for the sake of providing the colony with a good government. Currently, not only in London, but in Madrid and Brussels, a good government is understood to be one which, endorsing the entire legislative infrastructure of the European Community, A, will put an end to laundering money and other dubious bank operations, and B, will turn off the oxygen for the Colombian cartel, which sends narcotics from Morocco to Europe through Gibraltar. London's resolve to take the criminal zone under control in Gibraltar has strained relations between Great Britain and the Rock, which is the nickname for the colony. In speaking with us, the head of the Information Bureau of Gibraltar for Great Britain, Alberto Poggio, said that his government would not accept most of the accusations made against it. He also feels imposing direct rule is unlikely and dismisses the thoughts of possible civil disorders in that case. And again, Russian problems. Today in Russia, more than 500,000 children are orphans who live and don't live too well in orphanages. And today in Moscow, one more opened, but not quite of the usual type. In the very nature of orthodoxy, kindness, patience, and love are embedded. A triumphant prayer service in Russia's first Orthodox sanctuary for orphaned children under the Moscow Cathedral of the Ascension of the Lord by the Sivpuhovsky Gates. The Most Holy Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Alexei, gave the orphanage as a gift an icon of the Savior, with prayerful wishes and a reminder of the words of Christ the Savior. Labor not the children to come to me, and the Lord will bless their lives and their spiritual growth. Hope for rich sponsors didn't materialize, and the orphanage was built by the labor and provision from the Moscow government. And the city will support it through its own money. Except, and apart from a material technical basis, one has to put one's heart into this matter. Here we have to help a child to again find his parents' home. And I like very much the fact that the Church and Orthodoxy took on not the material support, but the raising and moral support of the children. From the new year, 30 children, including these that you see, will move into this contemporary, well-equipped building. Here there are rooms for recreation and study activities and sports gymnasia, a swimming pool, and in time the orphanage will be extended so that more children deprived of homes can find the warmth of their homes. But these plans are not of great joy because in Russia, in peaceful times, there is a constant growth of children deprived of parental comfort. And something else that's done for children. The 5th International Festival of Television Programs for Children and Youth began today in the southern Ural city of Orenburg. Journalists, cameramen, directors from 30 companies of Russia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Belarus, and Georgia came here for the 5th and now International Festival of Programs for Children and Youth. Its organizers are the GTRK Orenburg Ostankino administration of the district, and there are volunteers here in such quantities, among them the Orenburg Poultry Production, which has provided its premises, and here people gathered of tens of nationalities to reconfirm how close and dear we are to each other. The festival is simply wonderful, and the main thing that is important here is not to get to attend a conference somewhere and go, but the main objective is our friendship, that we're together again. This is the most important thing. And about the main event in the cultural life of the country, today briefly, the prominent musicians will participate in the Festival of Arts, which opened in the Bolshoi Hall of the Conservatory. It's very pleasant that many of them have cancelled their tours abroad, feeling it an honor to participate in a festival at home. And that's all the news at this hour. I bid you farewell, but ahead, naturally, sports news with Oksana Polonskaya in the studio. Goodbye. Hello, briefly about the main sports events of the day. Today is the decisive day of the traditional hockey tournament for the prize of the Izvestia newspaper. The main trophy was competed for by the teams of Russia and the Czech Republic. This was a difficult and intriguing match. Both teams had equal chances for victory, but the only goal in basic time was scored in the first period by Sergei Sorokin, who used the advantage of outnumbering the rival. Despite many tense moments at the nets of both teams, the score remained as previous. The Russian team is the winner of the main prize. In the match for third place, the Finnish and Swedish teams met. Basic time ended 1-1, and in the first minute of overtime, the Finns scored again, and the score was 2-1. The Finnish team is in third place. Russian hockey stars Sergei Makarov and Igor Ilarionov were invited to play on the Chelyabinsk tractor team to participate in the International Hockey League Cup. Itartas Sports reports that the consent of the players was received and only financial questions must be worked out. The Swedish skier Todd Mogren won the 10-kilometer race at the World Cup in the Italian Zapata. In second place is his compatriot Henrik Forsberg. Vladimir Smirnov from Kazakhstan came in third, and leading in the overall tally is the Norwegian Bjorn Deli. At the end of the year is the time to give out all sorts of awards. The name of the king of European soccer is known, Christos Stoichkov, who plays for the Spanish Barcelona. He, this year, has received the Golden Ball, an award which is annually determined by the French weekly France Soccer. And again about soccer. The professional amateur tournament Business Moscow is reaching its end. Beskov Club against the CSKA, but not the Army team, the players of the Central Athletic Actors Club. In this match, the esteemed actor of Russia, Alexander Martynov, let 3 goals into the net and unfortunately is not the esteemed goalie, but this is for now. The finale of the tournament is the 31st of December. Good evening. Information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. The cyclone over the Barents Sea and atmospheric fronts will define the weather on the Kola Peninsula in Karelia, the Arkhangelsk district, and the Republic of Komi, where it will be cloudy with snow, with isolated blizzards and strong gusty winds. Temperatures from -2 to 7 degrees. In Karelia, 0, -5. In the Nenetsk Autonomous District and in the Republic of Komi, -12 to 17 degrees. Under the influence of an atmospheric front, it will not be quite so cold in the Baltic countries and the northwest region. Temperatures from 0 to -5 with some light snow and isolated rain. Cold and wintry in Belarus at night, 10 to 15 during the day. 8 to 13 below zero. The cold anticyclone from the central regions will slowly shift to the central Volga. Therefore, in the Volga-Vyatsk and in the central regions, the skies will be clear without precipitation. Temperatures at night -22 to 27. During the day, -15 to 20. On the central Volga and in the central Chernozem area, in the zone of an anticyclone, it will be dry, cold, and clear at night, -23 to 28. During the day, -19 to 24 degrees. It will be a little warmer in the Volga-Grad region and in the Rostov district, where at night -13 to 18. During the day, it will be -9 to 14 degrees. In Ukraine and Moldova, under the influence of that same anticyclone, no precipitation is expected. Day temperatures -9 to 14. In Moldova, -3 to 8. In the Krasnodar and Stavropol areas in the republics of the Northern Caucasus, inclement weather will be sustained with isolated snows. Temperatures from -2 to 7 degrees. In the Chechnya Republic, cloudy with isolated snows, winds easterly 5 to 10 meters per second, and temperatures -3 to 6. Beyond the Caucasus, cloudy skies with precipitation, temperatures from +1 to 5 in Armenia, around 0. In St. Petersburg, cloudy, snowy at night, -8 to 11, -8 to 11. During the day, -4 to 6. Winds are from the south, 5 to 10 meters per second. In Moscow, tomorrow, partly cloudy skies without precipitation at night, -20 to 22. During the day, -15 to 17 degrees. In the next 2 days, gradual warming is expected. At night, -12 to 17. During the day, -7 to 12 degrees. That completes our broadcast. All the best. Goodbye.